We are now 2 weeks away from not only the rookies, but the Cleveland Browns veterans reporting to 2025 training camp. So we're going to continue with our training camp previews on positional rooms. We're going to get to the wide receivers today, and there's potential here for this group to exceed expectations. But with every positional group right now with the Cleveland Browns, there are a lot of questions. Your latest Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network begins now. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. And on behalf of all of us here at the OBR, we appreciate everybody who comes on out for their favorite Cleveland Browns content from their favorite Cleveland Browns writers here at the OBR, and all of you who join us every night at 6 p.m. on the OBR streaming network. Beginning with Browns 3D, it is Thursday, 7 o'clock. You will have All Eyes on Cleveland, Brad Ward, Casey Kinnaman to follow afterwards. Make sure you subscribe, of course, over on YouTube. Make sure, of course, you are subscribed over on Twitch. Now, with every positional group here for the Cleveland Browns in 2025, I think the potential is there for each group to be good. You add up each one of these groups that can perform and end up being, I would say a plus, then you have the possibility for where the Cleveland Browns could be a team that certainly exceeds expectations in 2025. But there are certainly a lot of questions, and in regards to the wide receiver room, I think there's one thing right now that absolutely is just kind of the headliner. And I think the one thing that everybody believes is it's basically the proven commodity within the room. And of course, that is Jerry Jeudy now in year 2 with the Cleveland Browns. As we all know, it was a swap with the Denver Broncos, 5th-round pick. Browns brought in Jerry Jeudy, who had underachieved. There's really no other way to put it. Jerry Jeudy had underachieved in his time with the Denver Broncos. I still think Jerry Jeudy is a more talented wide receiver than Courtland Sutton. The Denver Broncos chose to continue with Courtland Sutton, and you can't necessarily fault Denver in any way. Whatever Denver did last offseason, it certainly translated with them making the 2024 AFC playoffs. So, there's no ha-ha, so to speak, here, or pointing the fingers that Denver moved on from a player that was a former first-round pick of theirs and only got a 5th-round pick. Obviously, for right now, for Denver, everything's kind of smelling roses. Jerry Jeudy absolutely needed to change his scenery. Just never was living up to, where he had been drafted in the first round by the Denver Broncos. It seemed, he kind of got lost in that 2-year period where they had Russell Wilson. It was just essentially just a lost period altogether for the Denver Broncos. Comes to Cleveland. And I guess originally what we all kind of thought was, okay, Amari Cooper is going to be the one. Jerry Jeudy will be the future one. You have this great 1-2 combination, you think, at the top of your wide receiver room. Amari Cooper, I don't know what happened late in that Houston Texans game on Christmas Eve where Amari Cooper was just an absolute monster in 2023. But if you recall, after that, he wasn't able to go in the Thursday night game where the Browns actually clinched it. He didn't play in week 17. Week 18, was very limited in the playoff game. And Amari Cooper never really looked like he had much real juice in him last year when he was with Cleveland, or then when he was with Buffalo. It was whatever happened with that injury on Christmas Eve in Houston, where Amari Cooper was just destroying the Texans. He was just never the same after that. And maybe that is one of the reasons why Amari Cooper is still a free agent, this late into the summer of a football season for a guy who's, between 30 and 31 years old. But for the Browns and Jerry Jeudy, everything essentially just came up roses. Second straight wide receiver trade for Andrew Berry that just absolutely crushed it. The Cooper trade was a huge, huge success. The Jeudy trade was obviously a huge, huge success as well. Jeudy just took off in his first year in Cleveland, broke the franchise record for yards receiving within a year, went to Denver on a Monday night game, and even though the Browns fell short, Jerry Jeudy went into Denver and basically reminded everybody there just exactly what the heck his name was. One of the most impressive things about what Jerry Jeudy did in 2024 certainly was just the revolving door at the quarterback position. It's really, really difficult as a wide receiver to maintain a high level of success, a high level of production when you're not playing and you just don't have that continuity with the quarterback. It's not supposed to work like it did for Jerry Jeudy. And certainly for the Browns, the quarterback they thought was the best of the bunch in Deshaun Watson. We all know how it worked out. But after that, in 2024, you just saw Jeudy excel week in, week out, whether it was Jameis, whether it was other quarterbacks. And, it was just Jerry Jeudy just finally getting comfortable within his own skin, finally having, that light relit within himself of just, overall confidence and, faith in his own game. And, look, Jerry Jeudy was a highly, highly regarded player during his recruiting process and going to Alabama. Did not disappoint in his time at Alabama. Was a highly regarded wide receiver prospect in his draft class. And to his credit, it took a while, but that star player was still inside Jerry Jeudy. And Jerry Jeudy certainly just absolutely showed everybody. And, probably had something to do with, the faith from the Cleveland Browns. Once they acquired him, they paid him like a top receiver, even though Jerry Jeudy technically, statistically, had not shown to that point that he was a top receiver. But it all just kind of came up roses, for Jerry Jeudy. I think that's going to continue. I think Jerry Judy's time in Cleveland is going to turn out to be extremely successful for him. Even though we are probably not to the point yet where he has his true, I'd say, running mates of number 2, number 3 within that wide receiver room. Those questions could be answered. Or having the idea of who his ultimate, basically, quarterback is going to be in his time here in Cleveland. A lot of questions, of course, will bounty around that quarterback position well through 2025 and certainly up until the 2026 NFL draft. But you're established. Jerry Jeudy is your top dog. He's your top target. As much as, David Njoku is a, solid player when the offense is working all around, because for David to be successful, you need the entire offense to kind of be doing its thing. What we learned in 2024 is the entire offense doesn't have to be doing its thing for Jerry Jeudy to still have massive impact and massive production. That is the one thing we learned about Jerry Jeudy in 2024. And, look, Andrew Berry takes his knocks, takes his hits. You guys want to give them to him, that's fine. But it's always interesting that, nobody ever brings up, the massive W's that Andrew Berry, has given this franchise. Certainly trading Amari Cooper, trading a 5th round pick for Amari Cooper is a massive win. Trading a 5th round pick for Jerry Jeudy was a massive, massive win. Now, again, questions, right? Questions everywhere. And if you were probably to label what's going to be the Cleveland Browns summer, unanswered questions, questions answered. That's the way it's going to come down to. Cedric Tillman, his rookie year, there were times, a game in Denver, when he was playing with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, his high school quarterback, and really looked like the light was going on, which has kind of become, then DTR gets hit, right? And all of a sudden, Tillman not really factoring in. Then Joe Flacco comes to town, and for Cedric Tillman as a rookie in 2023, it's not easy. I'm talking about how difficult it is for guys to perform, veterans, with a revolving door at the quarterback position. Imagine what it's like with a, rookie wide receiver. Every quarterback's got a different snap count. Every quarterback, either A, likes to snap it early, snap it late. The younger and more, unestablished you are, the more time you want to be at the line of scrimmage trying to see everything with your eyes. Flacco came in. It didn't really work well between Joe and Tillman, and understanding, the established veteran and a rookie. There was an interception that Joe threw, and it was kind of because maybe Tillman wasn't in the place he needed to be. And then all of a sudden, Cedric Tillman was kind of phased out, as far as the normal rotation as a rookie. You get to last year, Once Cooper was moved on, it opened up a window for more playing time for Cedric Tillman. There was that 3-week period where Cedric Tillman was averaging 7 receptions for 95 yards and a touchdown a game. That's there. It's concrete. 3 straight weeks. The average was 7 receptions, 95 yards, and a touchdown per. That really looked like a second-year guy just absolutely kind of finding his way. Where Tillman is different and where, Tillman basically can plant his flag within that wide receiver room is he's just got a different build than everybody else. Legit 6'3", legit somewhere between 225 and 230. You see him standing next to some of the other wide receivers, and he really looks like he is more like an H-back, move tight end than he does just a wide receiver. Does some dirty work over the middle. Most of what we saw from Tillman last year when he was successful, were slants over the middle, were, of course, digs over the middle, skinny posts over the middle. And what you did see from Tillman is not only the ability to catch these balls in traffic, also the ability to, run after the catch. And, with his size, with his frame, with his strength, able to beat off would-be tacklers or just straight physically run through them. Then the Thursday night snow night in Cleveland against the Pittsburgh Steelers, Jeudy catches the ball over the middle, catches catches a pop to the head, and at the time, I think we all thought the same thing. Here it is, a Thursday night game. All right, probably not going to see Jerry Jeudy minimum till the next game, which at that point would have been 10 days away. Or maybe you hold him out that game, and then hopefully we can come back and Cedric Tillman can continue down this path, which looks to be a level to succession for Cedric Tillman. In the strangest scenarios, that was it. We never saw Cedric Tillman again. So as much promise and, optimism that was being built for Cedric Tillman, the air went out of balloon and you just never saw him again. And, is it more believable that Cedric Tillman is a 7 for 95 guy, or is it more believable, he's a, 3 for 47 guy? How about if we go if it's, maybe more of a 5 for 60 type of guy? Even still, if you can get Cedric Tillman to play at that pace opposite Jerry Jeudy with David Njoku, with a new guy in the slot who we're going to get to here in a minute, and, with a running back room that everybody should be able to be a contributor within the receiving game. Again, as many questions as there are, you believe there could be some answers here. The Browns are in this unique position where they got a lot of players that it's kind of make or break time. Cedric Tillman certainly is one of them. Diontae Johnson is certainly another one of them. Isaiah McGuire is another one of them. All of these guys, third-year guys, and, the opportunity's there. Diontae Johnson is going to start. Cedric Tillman is going to start if he is healthy. Isaiah McGuire, they had so much faith in Isaiah McGuire, they didn't really approach the edge rusher position in the offseason. They gave a small contract to Joe Shoyinka, as we all know. So certainly one of the biggest questions about how successful the Cleveland Browns offense can be in 2025, it's no question. You look at Cedric Tillman and you say, this is the guy that could be the difference maker, or could be the guy that somehow, some way has this offense held back just a tad. Going after Diontae Johnson was probably, I don't want to say a move of desperation, but on its surface, it doesn't look like, hey, maybe we didn't bring in the greatest guy here. And it was a crazy, weird carousel for Diontae Johnson, obviously, where he fell out of favor in Pittsburgh, ends up going to Baltimore, quickly falls out of favor in Carolina, then Baltimore, then Houston, then Baltimore basically just picked him up to put him on the timeout bench in the corner for the rest of the 2024 season. When things happen like that so frequently and with different stops along the way, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that Diontae Johnson probably played a good part in, his own failures, if you want to use that word, as the way things fell apart for his time quickly with those franchises. To his credit, I don't think he's talked about it a ton. To be fair, I don't think he needs to talk about it a ton. We live in this world where I think, all of a sudden, I'm sorry is just not good enough. And I think, Diontae Johnson, although it was brief, basically, admitted that, he wasn't the best version of himself. He appreciated the Cleveland Browns for the opportunity. They were basically the only franchise that, was trying to stay in touch and, keep dialogue going in the hopes that, a player of Johnson's ability, and let's not misunderstand this. Diontae Johnson can play. He's always been able to play. We're talking about a former second-team All-Pro. Diontae Johnson has legitimate talent. What happened in Pittsburgh? I think what happened in Pittsburgh was Diontae Johnson, because the quarterback play was poor, there was no way they could really feature Johnson and Pickens. Pickens, due to his big playability, kind of fit in better to the way the Pittsburgh Steelers offense was going, a team that, ran the ball a lot and was hoping to, get chunk plays through the passing game. And I really think that fit Pickens better than it fit Diontae Johnson. Ironically enough, neither one of them are in Pittsburgh anymore. But Johnson, you can put him in the slot, and he's had a reputation when his head was right and he was 100% into it and he was comfortable with the situation he was in and the team he was playing with and the roles that he was being asked to do, performed well. And, for Cleveland, this could be a coup, and look, you don't need him to come in and be a second team All-Pro. Not sure that's even the ceiling for a guy like Diontae Johnson anymore. But there is certainly a path where Diontae Johnson can catch north of 50 passes for this Cleveland Browns team in 2025. And, it's difficult because he's probably not a guy that you can have a high level of dependency with. His last 2 years speak for himself, obviously. But if he's committed and he just wants to play and he wants to get out there and be able to perform, and it's not about necessarily wins or losses, it's not about the situation he's in, then this was one of the better opportunities, even if it was the only opportunity for Diontae Johnson. It always feels like the Browns are forcing somebody into the slot. That was one of the biggest issues you had with Elijah Moore in his time here with the Cleveland Browns. Is the Browns kept just trying to make him something that he was not. Yes, he was not ideal size to play on the outside. But it didn't stop him any other time. Didn't stop him when he was tearing up the SEC at Ole Miss. The Browns, every team could use a solid slot receiver. The Browns are no different. Well, now they maybe have one. And somebody that can probably give you a decent amount of contribution. And, of course, that someone is Diontae Johnson. Do I carry a, fear factor that, at any given point, maybe it could fall apart and Diontae's just not vibing with it, not feeling with it? I'd say, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to, we try to be honest with you here, right? We're not, throwing stuff up against the wall. But for Diontae Johnson, I mean, you don't ever want to tell anybody it's last chance saloon, but it kind of feels pretty legitimate that it's probably last chance saloon right now for Diontae Johnson. Of the reserves, I would say probably the highest on that list right now for me, as far as I think can go from not doing much in 2024 as a rookie to somebody that can maybe have some impact here in 2025, is probably Jamari Thrash. And they tried to get him on the field a lot towards the end of last season. Didn't really get involved that much. The word from spring all along is that, Jamari Thrash has, been doing everything. He's been very proactive, putting more muscle on, very active in the facility day in, day out, working out, honing his craft, watching film. And, that gives you an opportunity to be put in a spot to succeed. Doesn't mean you're going to succeed, but obviously, hopefully, the more homework, the more studying you do, the better you fare when the test comes your way. So, you would think, and certainly with some of the other guys that are here in this wide receiver room, that Jamari's still kind of fresh at year 2. So you have to think the Cleveland Browns are hopefully going to have some faith in Jamari Thrash. And although there are things that are going to work against him, possibly in front of him, that would be certainly Cedric Tillman. That certainly would be Diontae Johnson. But if Jamari Thrash goes out and, shows really well early in training camp, shows really well in preseason games, I don't think the Cleveland Browns are going to ignore a guy who's only now in their second year. I think they will probably reward somebody that they drafted who appears to be on a path for success. Caden Davis, practice squatter. We have not really seen much of him. DeAndre Carter, I would say at this point, if they don't keep DeAndre Carter, it costs a little bit of money. I don't know if I ever really understood the move to begin with, and everybody, oh, well, return, with certain things that are considered, for me, I consider a luxury. Your return guy for me is a luxury. Look, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs and you decide you want to make a spot and you need somebody to be that 53rd guy and, be a good returner and you're not sure what else he brings to your ball club, knock yourself out. When you were a team like the Cleveland Browns, who have roster holes everywhere, uncertain positional groups everywhere, I'm not just bringing in one guy and saying, oh, well, he's the return guy. And no, I'd rather give somebody else an opportunity who could legitimately make the roster, not just as returns. There's other guys who can return. There's plenty of guys who return. Jerome Ford can do your kickoff return duties. Most of the time, punts are fair caught anyway. So, I'm not, just because DeAndre Carter is getting money and could cost money to move on from, that doesn't guarantee me, in my opinion, that there is a path for playing time. David Bell kind of feels like a guy that just, I think nobody's ever really been a big fan of. And with him disappearing early last year in Jacksonville with the hip injury, it seems like, everybody just kind of forgets he exists. Closed, certainly 2023 with a little action. Joe Flacco and he had a little rapport going. I think Bell caught 7 passes in the playoff game. It certainly was not a high yardage total by any means whatsoever. Certainly had that big play in 23 against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Ironically enough, it was in Jacksonville against the Jaguars where, his 24 season ended. Final year as well. So he is now in his final year of his rookie deal. Nothing's going to be guaranteed to David Bell. What David Bell does is David Bell is a sound route runner who gets into the open window when he's supposed to be there. There's not much special after that with David Bell. He's not overly fast. He's not overly elusive. He is not going to wow anybody athletically. Definitely more of a old school wide receiver type. There's an opportunity for David Bell. There is. But David Bell's probably going to need to have some success early and be a constant factor here. And of course, Diontae Johnson being here certainly is another thing that hurts a guy like David Bell. Michael Woods has always been somebody that everybody kind of cheers for, loves, but Woods is in that same boat as David Bell. These guys both drafted in 2022. They've been here forever. And to this point, it's, have you done enough to be able to stick around? And, I can give you 4 guys right off the top who are going to make this wide receiver room. Woods, Bell are certainly guys that are going to battle for it afterwards. And there also is, the mystery box where I'm sure the Cleveland Browns are scouring and looking for more wide receiver talent every single day. And they will get their opportunity as they're going to hold the second waiver claim after initial cutdowns. And we've done episodes and we've talked about teams like Tampa, teams like Green Bay, teams like New England, who have extremely deep wide receiver rooms. And there's just no way that these teams are going to be able to go keep 7, 8 wide receivers. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to be possible. So not only are these guys competing against each other, they're also competing against the unknown. Luke Floria has kind of become, I would say, and you guys do it every year. You plant your flag, you find some feel-good story in the spring and summer at the wide receiver position, and we run to see how it works out. Floria running around OTAs in jersey number 37. Not necessarily sure how high the expectations are that Luke Floria could make this team. But like I said, we know that there's 4 guys probably staying. And Diontae Johnson is definitely a big asterisk. So there is obviously opportunity here for these guys. Cassine Johnson, certainly another interesting name. This undrafted free agent from this year's draft class. Somebody that could probably, find his way on specials, which is going to be the start of it all if you're going to be wide receiver 5, wide receiver 6, not just with Cleveland, with just any team in the NFL. There's not going to be any defined role for you. The defined role for you is, if you play well on specials, you dress on game day, which then means, God forbid, there's an emergency or an injury. All of a sudden, you just, you go from playing specials to also getting to play wide receiver. Weird that you got to prove yourself somewhere else to get the opportunity at your natural position. But that's the way it works in the NFL when, you're only dressing 48 guys a week. A lot of the questions in regards to this wide receiver room, it's definitely, there's no question it comes down to, the success and what should be I guess interesting would be the word we use as far as the quarterbacks are concerned. And if anybody heard Mary Kay Cabot today with Ken Carman and Tony Lima, she basically put it out there that, like, not that the Browns don't have expectations here in 2025, but it seems like everybody who's ready to run Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry out of town, it doesn't seem to be that 2025 is going to be the litmus test that is going to ultimately decide the fate of Kevin Stefanski or for Andrew Berry. They understand they're up against it at the quarterback position right now. That certainly could be rectified within a year. My good friend Brent Sobolewski over at Bleacher Report. Brett, we love you. We do. I don't see any way whatsoever that Arch Manning and the Cleveland Browns are going to be something that syncs up. I honestly believe the New Orleans Saints, and the only plan the New Orleans Saints should have in 2025 is making sure they absolutely secure the number 1 pick. Because if there is any team that the Manning family, in my opinion, would alter the 4-year collegiate plan for Arch Manning, it would be if the New Orleans Saints somehow got their hands on the number 1 overall pick in the 2026 draft. I think that would absolutely change everything for Arch Manning and certainly for a good chance the New Orleans Saints. But if the case is that, whatever the ultimate outcome of 2025 is not going to shake up things as far as coaching and front office things for the Browns, then what are we doing with Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco? Because it should all be about whether or not Shedeur Sanders, which is the way I think it would go, or Dylan Gabriel. You can think that way if you choose to. It should be all about those guys finding a way to prove to you that either one of them, or both of them, or neither of them are capable of leading this franchise into the future. And when I say the future, I'll put it at taking them to the new stadium. That's what this should be about, especially when you come out and you say things like, you don't think the overall product this year is going to affect the head coach or the front office. If that's the case, then let's get the evaluation period going, and going right damn now. I understand appeasing veterans. I understand trying to make it look like you are, in this for the haul. But let's be serious. If 2025 is not about 2025, then we don't need a 40-year-old quarterback or a 2022 first-round pick who's now on his 3rd NFL team. For the most part, those guys' stories, the die has been cast. It should all be about finding out what the ultimate future is for Shedeur Sanders or Dylan Gabriel or both or neither. Again, that's the way it should go. But the Cleveland Browns wide receiver room has potential. With everything right now with this team, it's about questions. And, can certain guys stave off Father Time? Can certain guys step up? Can certain guys like a Cedric Tillman show what the best of Cedric Tillman is the overall consistent product of Cedric Tillman? There's questions everywhere with this team. A lot of them could be answered for the good, and Browns could be a lot better than people thought. A lot of them could be answered negatively, and the Cleveland Browns, go through another rough season here in 2025. As always, we appreciate everybody here who comes to the OBR for their favorite Cleveland Browns coverage, whether it's written content from your favorite writers on the OBR or joining us every evening starting at 6 p.m. on the OBR streaming network. Browns 3D off first. Me, your host, Jeff Lloyd. Stick around here on Thursday, 7 o'clock. All eyes on me. Brad Ward, Casey Kinnaman to follow. Stick around. If you're not subscribed to the OBR on YouTube, do it now. Make sure you're subscribed to the OBR over on Twitch. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. Browns 3D on the OBR streaming network. And we will talk to y'all tomorrow.